While most of the world was distracted by silver's price movement and the chaos in the commodities markets, something far more dangerous was happening quietly in the background. There were no headlines, no emergency announcements, and no public warnings. Instead, buried deep inside enforcement updates and internal restructuring, the Internal Revenue Service initiated one of the most aggressive financial surveillance expansions in modern American history. This was not a policy debate. It was not a proposal. It was an operational shift. Specialized enforcement teams were deployed, data systems were integrated, and audit priorities were reclassified. The target was clear: individuals who had purchased physical gold and silver within the last 24 months. This is not a theory. This is not speculation. This is an active enforcement strategy already in motion. The IRS has made a fundamental decision that precious metals ownership is no longer neutral behavior. In their view, it represents financial dissent. When someone converts dollars into physical silver, they are exiting a system of centralized control, digital tracking, and monetary dependency. That exit is now being treated as a threat. Bank withdrawals, wire transfers, credit card records, dealer purchases, shipping data, and reported income are being cross-referenced into unified financial profiles. Algorithms now flag behavior patterns that indicate hard asset accumulation. If your spending does not align with your reported income, you are elevated for review. If your cash movements correlate with bullion purchases, you are flagged. If your financial behavior suggests wealth preservation instead of debt participation, you become a point of interest. Ownership of physical metal now places you on a radar system that did not exist in this form before. The primary mechanism enabling this expansion is the reinterpretation of reporting laws, especially the 1099-B framework. Historically, precious metals reporting applied only to specific quantities, forms, and transaction thresholds. Those thresholds created space for private ownership. That space has now been erased. Under the new interpretation tied to digital asset language, the IRS claims that any transaction involving stored value qualifies as reportable activity. In effect, the reporting threshold has been reduced to zero. Every transaction becomes data. Every purchase becomes a record. Every sale becomes a digital footprint. This information is not stored in isolation. It is aggregated, analyzed, categorized, and mapped. Patterns are built. Networks are constructed. Ownership clusters are identified. The result is not just taxation. It is classification. It is indexing. It is registry creation. Not a public registry, but a functional one. A system that answers who owns metal, how much they own, where they bought it, how often they buy it, and how their financial behavior compares to their reported income. Registries are not created for compliance. They are created for enforcement. They exist to enable future action. This is happening now because the U.S. government is no longer solvent in any meaningful sense. Interest payments on debt are consuming tax revenue at accelerating rates. Deficits are structurally embedded. Economic growth is slowing. Income tax revenue is weakening. Corporate tax receipts are unstable. The traditional tax base is eroding. The government needs money, and it needs it desperately. But politically, it cannot openly raise taxes without backlash. It cannot cut spending without destabilizing the system. So it has turned to asset taxation, not real wealth taxation, but nominal wealth taxation. Inflation creates the illusion of rising wealth. Asset prices rise as currency value falls. Silver goes up, not because it is more valuable, but because the dollar is worth less. The IRS intends to tax that illusion. They will treat inflationary gains as real profits and extract revenue from them. This is financial repression. It is the oldest playbook in history. Debase the currency, force people into assets, Then tax the asset appreciation to fund government obligations. The citizen becomes the shock absorber for systemic failure. On paper, they look richer. In reality, they are poorer. Their purchasing power collapses while their tax burden rises. This is how empires finance decline. At the same time, banks have been fully integrated into the enforcement structure. They are no longer neutral institutions. They function as surveillance nodes. Cash withdrawals are algorithmically analyzed. Structured withdrawals under reporting thresholds are flagged. Behavioral models identify patterns associated with asset accumulation. Suspicious activity reports are generated without crimes being committed. These reports go directly to federal enforcement databases. Accounts can be frozen, transactions can be delayed, access can be restricted. No charges are required, no convictions are required. Suspicion alone is sufficient. The presumption of innocence no longer applies inside the financial system. Privacy itself has become a trigger. The act of wanting control over your own money is now interpreted as potential wrongdoing. The massive expansion of the IRS workforce was never about the ultra-wealthy. Billionaires do not fear audits. They operate behind legal structures, trusts, foundations, offshore entities, and professional shields. The real target is the middle class, the financially aware, the people trying to preserve purchasing power, the people opting out of debt culture, the people converting currency into assets. These new agents are trained to identify lifestyle mismatches. If your reported income does not align with your spending behavior, you become a case. If your savings behavior contradicts consumer debt patterns, you become a case. If your asset profile suggests independence instead of dependency, you become a case. Audits are not just financial procedures. They are psychological weapons. They consume time. They drain resources. They create fear. They destabilize families. They produce compliance through exhaustion. Even when no wrongdoing is found, the damage is done. Fear becomes the enforcement tool. The goal is not justice. The goal is submission. This entire enforcement expansion aligns perfectly with the rollout of central bank digital currencies. CBDCs represent total financial visibility, total transaction tracking, total behavioral control. Every purchase recorded, every transaction categorized, every tax deducted automatically, every account programmable. Physical cash and physical silver are the last remaining obstacles to this system. They are outside the grid. They cannot be remotely frozen. They cannot be digitally censored. They cannot be programmed. They cannot be tracked in real time. By making metals ownership legally dangerous, financially risky, and socially stigmatized, the path is cleared for digital control. In a CBDC system, money is no longer property. It is permission. It is access. It is conditional. Silver stands in direct opposition to that model. That is why it is being targeted. Tax forms now function as surveillance tools. Questions about commodities and digital assets are not designed for compliance. They are designed for identification. Answering no risks perjury. Answering yes flags you for scrutiny. This forces self-reporting into enforcement databases. Once ownership is documented, policy can change instantly. History has shown this repeatedly. Registration always precedes regulation. Regulation always precedes restriction. Restriction always precedes confiscation. This pattern does not change. Only the technology does. Dealers are under pressure. Coin shops are audited. Customer records are demanded. Online dealers already log every transaction. Cash is being pushed out of circulation. As a result, the market has begun pricing privacy itself. Non-KYC silver commands massive premiums. People are paying more for anonymity than for metal. Privacy has become a commodity. The free market is assigning value to invisibility. This is not paranoia. This is rational adaptation to surveillance economics. Globally, there is no escape through traditional finance. G7 coordination has eliminated offshore secrecy. Financial data sharing is automatic. Banking privacy is dead. Physical metal held privately remains one of the last assets without counterparty risk. Not because it is magical, but because it exists outside digital systems. The push for unrealized gains taxation reveals the endgame. Taxing assets you have not sold forces liquidation. It converts ownership into liability. It prevents generational wealth. It transforms savings into obligations. It destroys long-term planning. It ensures dependency. This is not policy reform, it is structural extraction. History is clear. When governments become insolvent, they turn inward. They extract from their citizens. They criminalize independence. They weaponize taxation. Rome did it. France did it. Every collapsing empire does it. Aggressive taxation is not strength. It is desperation. It is the final stage of fiscal decay. Silver endures because it exists outside political systems. It has no issuer. It has no central authority. It has no algorithm. It has no switch. It has no master key. It cannot be printed. It cannot be digitally erased. It cannot be frozen. It cannot be censored. It does not require permission. That is why it has survived every empire, every currency, every collapse, and every regime. That is why it is targeted. Not because it is worthless, but because it is independent. The squeeze is not just on price, it is on autonomy, it is on privacy, it is on freedom. Hold the line.